Awesome. Well, great to be back. To anybody who's been joining us on the other sessions, thank you for coming once again. And for anyone who is attending their first of this series, great to have you here with us. Really interesting discussion to be had. Awesome panel once again for webinar number 7 of the Building an Enterprise Level System with Xero series, presented by CFO Tech Stack. My name is Jack Teal. I am the APAC commercial lead at Mayday. We're on a mission to mend month end for larger Xero businesses, beginning with the needs of those who are multi-entity, intercompany recharges, cross-entity bank recs, keeping intercompany loans in balance. They're all things that we're solving today, but we're not dealing in consolidations. We draw the line there, and I think that's important to clarify for the discussion today. If you're interested more in the multi-entity side, there's another session on that, and we're focused on consolidations for today. As a little bit of background, I started my career as an accountant as well. I started with PwC about 10 years ago, where I completed my chartered. I then worked as an advisor to SMBs and have spent the last 5 years in a variety of different roles across the Xero accounting tech landscape, which has been awesome. I'm really passionate, and I'm also bullish as ever, around where Xero's headed in the future, especially around its use for larger businesses. It's clear, though, that from dealing with a lot of in-house finance teams and CFOs who are in this larger Xero business space, that there is a lack of content focused on this audience. So really thrilled to be here today to dive deeper into this space, thanks to CFO Tech Stack with some, extremely experienced individuals. On that note, I might hand over to you guys to introduce yourselves. So Tyler, I might start with you, if you can kick us off.
Thanks. And hi, everyone. I'm Tyler Caskey, one of the partners at the Bean Counters. We are a consulting company here in Sydney that helps businesses and accounting firms, Australia and now internationally, help them find the right systems and install the right systems for their business, be that, in the Xero space or every now and then ERP. My background, similar to Jack, started in the Big Four in business services and audit. Did about 12, 13 years as a financial controller or a CFO. And then for the last 4 years have been back into consulting, helping businesses do things better.
Cool. Thanks, Tyler. Mark, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Mark Murray. I'm the Chief Finance Officer at the CAPS Clinic in Canberra. We're a healthcare business with a number of arms to it, specialising in plastic surgery and skincare. We have a day hospital we work out of. We also have a software business where we're developing practice management software. So it's a small business, but it's one with a lot of complexity, which is why I'm interested in how we deal with multi-entity operations in Xero.
Great. Thanks, Mark. And Lara.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Yeah, so I'm Lara, head of operations at Calxa. So Calxa is a tool that we use for management reporting, forecasting, consolidations, of course, which is what we're talking about today. And yeah, a bit about my background. So I'm a chartered accountant, taking a little bit of a different pathway to yourself and Tyler. So I was more of an accountant in industry, so heavily focused on the forecasting and budgeting space side of things, and now we're headed over the other side and helping customers and other accountants to utilize software for their businesses.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lara, and thanks, Tyler and Mark as well. As you can see, we've got a great mix of experience here across different places. So CFO in-house right now. Tyler's obviously somebody who's working with CFOs and teams to implement better systems, and Lara on the vendor side. So it should be a really good discussion and great to have all of you here. In terms of setting the scene just a tiny bit more before we start, as I mentioned earlier, at Mayday, we're currently built for larger Xero businesses, and we often hear speaking to them that they're looking for an answer to a couple of key questions around their accounting tech stack. One is Xero still the right system for me? And 2 is, how long is that going to remain the case? So we want to help answer these questions as part of the series, because we know that the move to ERP is quote unquote horrible and hectic, as one of our clients said. It's incredibly expensive, and that's before 58% of ERP implementations fail. So the discussion, as if you've been along to other sessions along the way as well, has been around that question as to whether or not the experience on ERP is actually better, even if you do invest in it. And I'm sure we'll get into some of that today as well. But we really want to provide you with ERP peace of mind, the term that David, our CEO, coined. The peace of mind that knowing I can scale with Xero into my growth phase without needing to make that move. So we want it to be a really helpful series and session for our target customers. It's not Mayday content. It's not a product marketing demo. We're not showcasing any product today. It's really just about having a deep conversation with people who have been through this process before. We know that Xero isn't an all singing, all dancing panacea of software. We know that there's still a point where businesses will outgrow it, but we want to write the misconception or write the myth that you can't scale and grow on Xero at all. You can go a lot further on Xero than I think most people realize. So yeah, that's what we want to get into today and throughout the series. In terms of our agenda, just very quickly, first and foremost, we'll dive into what Xero does well in this space. Then we'll get into the growing pains and challenges that you're going to begin to experience as your group grows and your complexity grows. We'll look at the ecosystem and how you can leverage that to stay on Xero and leverage, I suppose, and to maybe get better outcomes than you were before. And then finally, we'll discuss that ERP piece. Once we've wrapped all of that up, we'll go to top tips, so final takeaways from the panelists. And if there's any questions, we'll go to the Q&A. But feel free to chuck those questions in as we go. I'll try and address them throughout the session. So yeah, don't hold back. Throw the questions in the Q&A. With that all being said, sorry about the intro. Want to get cracking now. So first and foremost, Tyler, I want to throw to you around that first point. What does Xero do well? So what does a scaling or growing business that has multi-entity challenges, what do they need to be thinking about as they scale up? What can they do on Xero as a starting point? And where do they start to maybe feel some growing pains there? And yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. And for me, it really comes to, Xero does the basics better than almost any system I've ever used. And this is from like installing BankLink and QuickBooks and MyOb since like 2001, all the way up to like NetSuite and using SAP and listed entities, is I always find my clients, myself, my team make way fewer mistakes in Xero. It's so much easier to get the basics of accounting right, get your accounts receivable actually balancing to the balance sheet, which MyOb, QuickBooks, Reckon still don't do at the moment, because you can allow journals to them. It allows, in my opinion, if you really automate, you can be about 40% quicker on Xero than you can on a system like NetSuite or MyOb Advanced, because it's just easier to use and faster to use. And then the third part I think it does really well is it's got like a very open API. So it's a lot easier for the Xero App Store partners to connect in and to grab the data and to quickly refresh. But also every now and then, if you need a custom built API, it can do that. So I always found like my base data is really good. Then my ability to test and trial apps and see what I like, see what I don't like, see if I like, the orange color of Calxa or the green color of Fathom, whatever kind of floats my boat, works. And then what I've always found next from there is, if you're within Xero, and you've got one consolidation, it's not that hard to export the reports and drop it into Excel if you really want to. I don't recommend it, but like they're reliable reports, they come out in the same function, they're a lot easier to manipulate. So I find it does the first 50% of like kind of month-end reporting and consolidations with pretty good skills and accuracy. You are on mute.
And so as you grow up and those downloadable Excel reports aren't meeting the needs anymore, what is that? I mean, what is the pain here? Is the pain simply you're going to be spending a lot of time on this and it's going to get more and more time consuming, or is there more to it than just that?
For me, it's the lack of delegation. So when I was in CFO world, the two things I could struggle to give away was the final board pack and the consolidation for any entity. And I just found that like my average financial accountant, who might have been brilliant at getting one set of books right or three set of books right, struggled to understand the concepts of consolidations and the debit credits to make sure the inter-entity loans were moved off, to make sure the management fees weren't showing, in certain instant circumstances, to look at the foreign exchange. So for me, when I was like working in business, I couldn't set up a reliable process on Excel to make sure it was foolproof. So that's where I found the apps really kind of come in is they allow me to set up the process, delegate it, and then, to allow without time cost. And usually this is done between like 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. if you're doing it on Excel, like doing the consolidation calculations. It speeds that up of the consolidations. And then you can start to do automatic eliminations of balances, which is it's just like no board member hugely values the amount of time a CFO puts into getting the perfect consolidated report. So the more you automate that, I find the better.
Yeah, great. I mean, Mark, I just want to throw to you to get your own experience here. Is what Tyler's saying ringing true to your own experience? Is there any other elements that you've kind of had, trying to deal with this and solve this problem yourself?
Yeah, Tyler really covered it well. I think what the tracking that Xero does allow you to do, you've got two levels of tracking there, which you can customize, and that's great. I think while you're dealing with different businesses, I think once you're starting to have multiple Xero files, then you're starting to deal with headaches around consolidation and spending that time working in Excel, and the controls and the potential for error in that, I think, are quite daunting, if not scary.
Yeah.
And the idea that you can bolt on the APIs, I think, is the other thing that Xero does particularly well, is just being able to look out there for the solutions that you need. I, in my current role, as soon as I stepped into it and saw that there were a number of entities, and what those entities needed was cash flow forecasting and budgeting and consolidated reporting on a monthly basis. First thing I thought was, I need a solution here. I cannot do this in Excel. It's just not going to happen in an efficient way.
Mm-hmm.
But the things that you do that Excel does well is what makes those apps actually work well. That ability to track, that ability to have the balances, all those things that Tyler said that make the data good and correct and reliable.
Yep. And Lara, I'd be keen to get your thoughts on what both Tyler and Mark have pointed out. You deal with this a lot with your own customers. So, is there anything else that you see come up regularly from a pain point perspective, or maybe things people should be thinking about if they're not using an add-on to Xero at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, certainly the points that have already been made around, time savings and eliminating the element of human error there. But the other thing as well that we get a lot is where customers are trying to create a uniformed sort of reporting structure where they map all of the entities to that same reporting structure, rather than having three sets of, three P&Ls worth of expense accounts, for example. So we do get that a lot as well. So it's certainly something that these software can handle and help you with producing nice, tidy and clear reports.
Yep. And so to those pain points, what should people be, I suppose, expecting from a consolidation solution? What we've kind of defined this in all of our sessions. What is a spend management solution? What is an AP solution? What does that encompass? What does a consolidation solution encompass from start to end?
Yeah, sure. So it's essentially going to be connecting with all of the Xero organizations. We're going to be pulling through that actuals data, so you can run that at any point in time. But it's essentially replacing the entire manual process. So you're building something called in our system an organization group. You're selecting your reporting currency. You're choosing your balance date as well for that group. And it's essentially in the background calculating, okay, is this a multi-currency group? Do we have any currency translation stuff to handle here? Okay, do we want a different format for this report? And essentially then with one click of the button, because we're bringing that data in regularly, you've got yourself consolidated reports, and that might be just some, actual financial statements. But also we've got the ability to look forward as well and do some forecasting in that space, and cash flow forecasting and things which, typically take significant amounts of time and manpower to get that done.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really had the discussion yet around forecasting. I mean, we've got a whole topic on it because I know it's a huge one. But I mean, Tyler and Mark, how do you see I suppose the connection there between, consolidations for a reporting purpose, I guess, looking backwards, and then forecasting looking forwards. Yeah, how do you see it? I don't know if you can speak to any experience specifically.
Yeah, it's very rare you get a CEO of a group that wants to look at 6 different budgets for 6 different companies. I've had it now and then, like with restaurant groups, and Jack, you and I have talked about that in the past, where they tracked each restaurant to their own metrics and didn't really care about the budget of the whole group, because they were trying to get perfect cost of goods sold or, do comparables more between the entities. But very much what I found in, I'd say 80% of the groups I worked with or for, was I always had to do like a consolidated group budget, like what are my total sales? What are the total assets? What am I, what are we trying to target as a group for net profit? And what are our potential distributions we can get? So I always found, being able to load a budget, because Xero operates on a very nice, simple single entity section. But if I've got a system like Calxa or Join or Fathom or Data Sites, I can always load my budget into those ones and then compare my consolidated actuals versus consolidated budgets. And Mark, to your point, without having to do 14 different tabs and 5 different spreadsheets, just makes my life a lot easier. And you said something about reliability, like it's more accurate because I'm not prone to human error there.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Go for it, Mark.
And I think the ability to be able to build up from your cost and revenue drivers at each of those business units is really important for me as well. If we want to cast a budget for, say a skin cancer clinic, it's got different drivers to, say, the private hospital business that we operate. And being able to build up from those metrics and then kind of fill in the gaps with, where we want to achieve our savings and where we want to improve our performance and so on. That's really important to me. And I've certainly had the experience of, not even across businesses, even within a single business unit, within a single system, the 14 tab spreadsheet is absolute nightmare. And you've always got to reconcile it back. Anything that's involving a spreadsheet, you've at some point got to say, okay, does this reconcile back to the source of truth? That's the fallback of having an app is, once you've set it up, you can test it and rely upon it from that point. Yeah.
And Mark, you said something magic there and this is not a Calxa pump session. Calxa does driver-based budgeting so well. Like,
yep.
It's such we all know, like I worked in professional services for a long time. So it was always my head count times the hourly rate times utilization, less a discount, less a write-off. That gave me my potential revenue. That is so hard to get out of Excel. And Calxa is one of the few systems. There are a few competitors in the big market that can do driver-based forecasting really well. And Mark, I guarantee you, like, you've experienced this where you buy a new store or you open a new business halfway through the year that was unbudgeted, and then we've got to go change our budgets again. And like doing that reforecast or copy paste in Calxa or forecast adjustment was really cool.
Yeah.
So I suppose, you mentioned it there, Tyler, around how competitive the landscape is in this space from a software perspective. There are a lot of options, I suppose, not all equal by any means. So how should someone who's listening into this thinking, okay, I'm still doing my consolidations in Excel, maybe I should be looking at something a little bit better. I'd like your perspective, Tyler, from you deal with this on a regular basis for your clients, trying to figure out which tools to place where. And then Mark, I'd be keen to get your thoughts on how you went about this yourself. Yeah, Tyler.
Yeah, it's a good question because there are a lot, and it's actually quite hard to look into, a system and see if it really matches your business. The first thing I always do is if I'm on Xero, I start with the Xero App Store for 2 reasons. One is it gives me data security, which is fantastic, and 2, it gives me like reliability of connection. And I know Calxa is on the store, so that means if the function or the connection breaks overnight, I don't have to call Calxa in the morning and convince them that it's broken. They'll already be on it because they've got a notice. and a security profile there and a
Mm-hmm.
connection profile. The second one for me is like I test a lot. So I remember when I was a young CFO and I had a recruitment business on Xero, I just jumped onto the App Store and did a free trial and had a play. And I talked to some friends that were in the larger group businesses as well. I talked to a few that were inside accounting firms about their favorites. And then what I really looked at is like my price per outcome. So, a good example is like we did a 37 entity group consolidation using Join because it's a bit more cheap and cheerful. It had 12-month consolidation, so it matched the price point and it was simple enough. But then again, we put another business that was a yacht club that had multiple different divisions. We put them on Calxa because it did consolidations, plus it did budgeting, plus it did driver-based budgeting as well. So we had budgeting and forecasting in one. And so, I really look at the App Store, number one, and then number two, I trial a few systems. Number three, I kind of look at my price point. And then number four, I really look at like, what is my end outcome, and how, what am I trying to get? Like a cheap and cheerful consolidated report to drop into the management pack, or am I actually, going to be connecting this to budgeting, and would it make sense for it to be in one entity?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Each app is generally focused on they do something very well, and then they have a few edge cases that they handle pretty well, and then there's going to be situations that aren't really in their space, even if they fall under the heading of consolidations. So understanding what persona you fit into as a business, what are your challenges that are unique, and which of the tools is really focused on those specific challenges, because not everyone wants to do everything, which makes sense. I mean, Mark,
Absolutely.
from your perspective, how did you go about finding the solution that you needed?
Well, this is a bit funny, really, because my experience with Calxa began when I had a trial CD. That ages that shows the age of my relationship with the product, and it dates back quite a while. And at that point, it was really about multi. We were dealing with projects. It was multi-project budgeting and having to build up multi-layers of budgets and then consolidate them back into useful reports for the managers and the board. And Calxa was my trial of Calxa back then, and I've brought that along to a number of organisations through my career over the last 10, 15 years. And when I came to Caps and I had that thought of I need software, it was really I actually need Calxa because it's a product that I'm familiar with and I know that it does the job. But Tyler's correct as well. You've got to find the solution that does what you need to do at the price that you need to do it at. And I value time above most things in this space. But if I were looking, I'd be doing the same thing, looking at the app store with Xero and trialing, and I do that with other apps all the time.
Yeah, great. I mean, if anyone is listening and has any really specific situations that they're consolidating with, and they think, oh, there's no way an app's gonna handle this because it is unique, I'd love to hear your questions or chuck them in the chat, and we can at least discuss it as a group, because ultimately, if we can leave you with some answers, that'd be great. Moving on, whilst people are thinking of any questions, moving on to point 4 on the agenda here around when might an ERP be the only solution. I'm keen to hear from you all on this. Lara, obviously you deal with a lot of customers who are on Calxa, a lot of who are on Xero. Every now and again, I imagine there's someone who's saying, "Hey, I don't use Xero, I use ERP." I'd be keen to get your thoughts on what are those challenges, or what's your experience been in that really large upper end Xero v ERP space? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, typically the questions that we get, whether it's a customer on Xero or an ERP, tend to be similar questions. They're looking for a solution that's going to give them nice looking, tidy reports, and things that you're not always guaranteed to get even in an ERP space. So it's certainly something that we get a consistent a consistent amount of customers or prospective customers coming to us asking about. On the back of that, we're actually looking to move more into that space and to create some integrations in that space. But ultimately, you know, people are coming from the ERP systems and asking similar questions to those on Xero. So it's not necessarily a solution that's going to fit everything that you need straight out of the box.
Yeah, that's interesting that, I mean, I think for a lot of people, there's an assumption that if I go ERP, that's going to solve my multi-entity consolidation needs. Tyler, have you dealt with any of these businesses who are saying, hey, I thought I was going to have this solved by going ERP or anything like that?
Yeah, like every other week at the moment. And like I know this to be true from experience, but in my soul, that the Xero consolidations are probably 50% faster than on NetSuite or Sage Intacct or my Advanced. It's just easier. Like the way the apps are built at the moment, because there's such competitiveness between, say, 5 of them in the market, you know, they're just easier to use, they're easier to refresh. And like I've done a ton of consolidations in NetSuite, and they're just not that simple. Like the inter-entity functions work, but they take ages to set up. So I've really found like that need to, just because you're a consolidated group definitely doesn't mean you need to be on an ERP. I try to stay on Xero in a business as long as I can before needing to go. There are some limits that make it make sense. A good example is we've moved a 50 entity Xero group up into an ERP because they were consolidating 50 entities into one and the volumes wouldn't make sense. And then they were doing divisional reporting. So I was like, that made sense. They went to NetSuite super happy, but they're slower at processing. And then on the other side, we've moved a large restaurant group from an ERP or NetSuite down to Xero, and they got 30% faster. And, we set up automatic consolidations in there with automatic loan, eliminations. And it was just easier. So I always found, there's no one answer, but volumes is definitely one. And even a lot of people talk to me about inventory. Like I got a friend using inventory in a ERP, and he's still using Excel behind it every day to upload to Shopify. So like, unless you're, throwing 5,000 transactions through a month, that's, you really want to have a consideration before you spend the $500,000 to change.
Yeah, no, good points. And Mark, I'm keen to get your thoughts. I mean, you're on Xero at the moment. You're solving your consolidation challenges with Calxa. So where do you see that? Is ERP kind of in the back of your mind? How do you see that space? Are you trying to avoid it? Do you think it's in your plans long term? What are you thinking about?
Look, I think it's something that I would need to keep an eye out for. At what point are the various functions that we're getting from apps delivering the outcomes that we need in an efficient way? And ultimately, it's going to come down to, price and output. I think you've always got to be looking at where is my tipping point there? That am I getting what I need in an efficient way? And if you look at the labour cost that you might give up to continue in one way or another, that to me is when that starts getting unmanageable and too costly is when I would start looking at, okay, I need another solution here. And are we getting what we need from the systems?
Yep. No, cool. I mean, guys, we've covered off pretty much everything that I wanted to as part of the agenda, and we don't have any questions in the chat as of yet. So feel free to chuck them in if you do have, a specific situation or specific questions. We're happy to answer them. We might wrap early if there aren't any questions, but I want to throw to each of you now to kind of provide I suppose a tip or takeaway or a piece of advice regarding this. I mean, there's been a lot of value shared already and a lot of tips, a lot of pieces of gold. So I appreciate it might be hard to kind of land on one, but I mean, Lara, from your perspective, you see a lot of this. I'll throw the question in a second, but what is your kind of top number one takeaway for anyone listening today?
Yeah, I think really it's about a business understanding and properly scoping out their needs. Because people will typically think, okay, we're a growing, scaling business. That must mean we've got to use X, Y, and Z system. But really, growing and scaling doesn't necessarily mean that any of your business processes have become any more complex. It might just be that you're dealing with more volumes. And of course, that's a consideration to move over to an ERP. But definitely about understanding really what is it that you need and making sure that you're tackling those core requirements. Because I think without that, you can end up going down a rabbit hole and finding a solution that maybe doesn't quite fit your needs, and then you end up back in the market looking for another one. So really important to understand your needs, really.
Perfect. Thanks, Lara. Mark, from your side, what's your kind of one piece of advice, takeaway, something to share?
Look, I think the more that you can move away from tools that introduce human error, the happier everybody's going to be in your organization. You're going to spend less time on it. You're going to spend less time worrying if you've got it right. I think one of we talked earlier about the things that Xero does and doesn't do. The thing that really bugs me about Xero is you can't reconcile anything except a bank account in it. There's no tool that allows you to reconcile your intercompany loans to a balance. You've got to take it out and do it elsewhere. So tools that allow you to, those intercompany loans and those elimination accounts are the key things you need to deal with your consolidations. And you don't want to be introducing human error into those processes.
Yeah, perfect.
Man, I fully agree. I'm the same. If I've got 2 entities or I've got 37 entities like we did last month, I'm using an app. Like if I look at like the average price per app, it might be $20, $30, $40 a month per entity, maybe $60 for 2 entities. If I look at my time cost as a CFO or a financial controller and my cost of error of putting up a board report that's got a balance sheet that doesn't balance or something that's off, I use that for sure. And like for our larger groups, we always use Mayday as well. Like it just makes sense. I know, Jack, you work for Mayday, but Mark and I were talking before about the intercompany loans in Mayday are just so simple. Like the amount of spreadsheets I've made since 2001 of company A owes company B $300, but it's $330 in the other entity. It just sucks. Like it just sucks because there's a bookkeeper somewhere in God knows Wollongong that put a $30 transaction to the loan account when it should have gone to expenses, and that cost you 40 minutes to find. That's where some systems like Mayday, Join, Calxa, Fathom just make life easier because it helps you hunt, does it work, right? And I think the play of utilizing best of breed technology, Xero does the basics really well. Then you use Mayday for your intercompany loans and your recharge, and you use Calxa for your budgeting or consolidations or both. And then once you might have a bit of a time cost at the start, a little bit, but you can do it all yourself. You don't really need a consultant. If you want a consultant, call me. It's no problem. But then you can do 90% of this work yourself. And the other question I'll answer online, Ashley Garone asked about Power BI. We use Power BI all the time. I don't use it for consolidations though, and I'll tell you why. We use Power BI for our mass data, daily data. So I always look at Power BI as what are the things that I have a lot of. So I use it for my list of invoices that get updated every single hour, refreshed every hour. I use it for my live data reporting across multiple entities, multiple groups, multiple divisions. We're doing a consulting firm in Brussels at the moment, and we're using it for their time report because it's live and updated. But what I prefer not to do in Power BI is try to do a debit credit system. So I use Calxa, Join, Fathom data sites, which all they do is like month-end reporting for Power BI, and I love it. So that's my distinguish. I go month-end in an app, I go Power BI for my math data. And it just seems to work really well. And I kind of think the apps are, for me as a finance person, Power BI, I share to the wider group.
Yeah, nice. Good answer. Mark, do you use Power BI at all? Just out of curiosity.
I do, and I use it for when I have specific data needs that requires that kind of drilling into the information and sorting and eliminating at a transaction level that I don't think is actually, well, to be honest, I haven't really explored other opportunities there, but I don't see that there's alternative solutions there for what I do use it for. It's really about that fine level of detail of aggregating transactions, even things like pay lines and timesheets.
Mm-hmm. No, perfect. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. I mean, no other questions at the moment, so I might wrap up. I mean, thanks, Lara, Tyler, Mark, for your time. As Tyler said, if you need help on any of this systems implementation stuff, feel free to reach out. He's pretty available on LinkedIn. Likewise, Lara, if you want to chat about Calxa with her, feel free to do that. Obviously, I'm here representing Mayday. It's not a Mayday session, but if you're in that space, just to clarify as well, I think it does get a little bit maybe confusing. We don't do the consolidation side. We do the pre stuff, intercompany balances, recharges, the stuff that you're dealing with during the month, and then Calxa handles that probably post-month end side of things a little bit more. We do have another question, so I'll just touch on this quickly before going over our upcoming session. So can Xero data be automatically loaded into Power BI? Anyone feel free to jump in.
Not automatically, but you can use systems like data sites, which pull the data, pop it into their Azure database, and you can connect Power BI to that. Or there's other products like Sync Hub and Stitch Data, which if you're a bit better at creating your own Azure or Google BigQuery database, you can do and use. But yeah, the leader in this space, without doubt, is Data Sites, which is a Xero app partner. And they give you nice, clean data that you can start to visualize within about 1 day. It's crazy.
Cool, easy. Hope that answers your question. Cool. I'll just move on quickly. Just mentioning our series wrap event. I appreciate this is just relevant for anyone here listening in who's in Sydney. But if you are in Sydney, feel free to scan the barcode there. Book in a ticket. It's free to come. There'll be some nibbles and drinks, but it's really just a couple hours at the Xero HQ in the Sydney offices to catch up, have a chat. We'll wrap up the event in person. There'll be someone from Xero there. I'll be there. There'll be a few others there, kind of just speaking to some of the highlights of the session. But it's a good opportunity to connect with peers who are dealing with this kind of stuff. So feel free to jump in, have a chat, and join us there. And then after today's session, we've got a few coming up. So we've got navigating and optimizing FX with Air Wallets tomorrow. Then we've got leveling up management reporting. We've got managing large-scale inventory too. So if you're not taking that day off after Anzac Day and you've got inventory on your list of things to solve, then definitely jump in. If you haven't registered for these sessions or any of the others, apacenterprise.cfotechstack.com, you can register there. And yeah, hope to see a lot more of you at the upcoming sessions. Thanks again for coming today. Lara, Tyler, Mark, really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you.